Hello, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Driti Atri, and you're watching Skyline. Now, when we hear the words national emergency, then most of the people, maybe they think about wars, missiles, or maybe an attack. But what if I told you that one of America's biggest emergencies this week, it is not coming from an enemy country. It isn't coming from a missile. It is not coming from a drone. It is coming from weather. That's right. Tonight, let's understand what is happening, why it matters, and how these stories are going to connect. So let's begin with the crisis that millions of Americans are experiencing every single day simply by stepping outside their home. Can you imagine trying to sleep after a day of 40-degree temperature? You wait for the sun to set. You expect the weather to cool down, but it does not. The heat stays there. The walls remain hot. The air feels heavy. Your body never gets a chance to recover. Well, that's exactly what millions of Americans are facing this particular week. Well, according to National Weather Service, more than 90 temperature records could be tied or maybe broken across the United States, and many of them are expected to be overnight temperature record. Now, normally nighttime gives our body a chance to cool down after a hot day. But this time, that particular relief that's missing. And health experts say that makes the whole situation even more dangerous. Now, when the human body remains hot for hours, the risk of dehydration, heat exhaustion, and even heat stroke increases dramatically. Here, doctors say that the danger is specifically high for elderly people, young children, pregnant women, outdoor workers, and people with the existing heart or maybe lungs condition. Well, the heat dome sitting over much of America has already contributed to heat-related deaths in some areas and has helped fuel the wildfires in the western United States. Cities from Florida to Texas and even places known for cold winters are expecting extremely warm nights. Well, think about that. America is famous for air conditioning. It is one of the most developed countries in the world. Yet, every single year, heat, in fact, extreme heat, it kills the people. And you know why is this happening? Because heat is often called the silent weather killer. It does not arrive with dramatic images like hurricanes. It does not create headlines like earthquakes, but slowly, hours after hours, it pushes the human body far beyond its limit. Well, experts are urging people to stay hydrated, avoid long period outdoors, use cooling center wherever available, and check on elderly neighbors or maybe relatives who have been living alone. Climate scientists say that extreme heat events are becoming more frequent and lasting longer in many parts of the world, which means this may not be an unusual summer anymore. It may become the new normal. But yes, while millions of Americans are worrying about the weather, another institution is worrying about something completely different: its own safety. When you think of United States Supreme Court, you could probably imagine powerful judges. In fact, historic legal decision and debates over the Constitution. But today, the conversation, it is not about Constitution. It is about security. Ladies and gentlemen, America's Supreme Court judges, they are asking Congress for a larger budget, with a significant part of the request focused on improving security for judges and their family. According to judiciary budget request, more funding would go towards protecting legal courthouses and expanding security for Supreme Court judges at their homes and while traveling. Now, you know why? Because officials say that threats against judges are increasing. Think about the responsibility these judges carry. Their decision can change immigration policy, abortion right, gun law, business regulation, and even presidential power. Every major ruling affects millions of people. But in today's deeply divided political environment, those decisions can also trigger anger, criticism, and sometimes even threats. And that is why security for them has become a growing concern. Now, this whole request, it also comes at a very politically sensitive and significant time. Justice Amy Coney Barrett and Justice Elena Kagan, they are expected to appear before Congress to discuss the court's budget, making it the first such appearance by Supreme Court judges in several years. But the story, it reminds us of something important here. Democracy is not only about elections, it is also about protecting the institutions that make the democracy work. Well, courts cannot function independently if judges fear their own safety. Now, whether people agree or they disagree with the judgment, the rule of law depends on judges being able to make decisions and without any intimidation. Now, the larger question is, how do you protect the people who are responsible for regulation of the Constitution? And how do you balance public criticism with personal security? Those particular questions are becoming increasingly important. But yes, security concerns are no longer limited to Washington. Thousands of kilometers away, another American institution has taken an unusual step because of rising regional tension. Now let's travel from Washington to West Asia. Can you imagine spending weeks preparing for your US visa interview? You collect your documents, you book your appointment, you arrange your travel, and then suddenly you receive a message saying that your appointment has been cancelled. Well, that's exactly what happened to many applicants in the United Arab Emirates. Ladies and gentlemen, the US Embassy in Abu Dhabi and the US Consulate in Dubai temporarily cancelled all the consular appointments through July 15th, citing wider regional security conditions. Applicants were instructed not to visit the embassy or consulate, and they were told that they would receive new appointment details directly. Well, emergency assistance for the US citizens that continues through designated channels. In the meantime, officials have not linked the whole move to one specific incident. Instead, they pointed to the broader security environment in West Asia. Routine visa processing also remains suspended until further notice, while emergency service continue to operate under adjust staffing arrangement. Now, this particular decision, it may sound administrative, but it tells us a much bigger story. Diplomatic missions are often among the first institutions to adjust the operations when security conditions become uncertain. Embassies constantly assess risks, they monitor local developments, and when necessary, they do shift staffing level or maybe public services to protect both the employees and the visitors. Now, for thousands of people waiting for visas, this particular thing means uncertainty. Business travelers, students, families, professionals, they may all have to wait longer before their applications move forward. It is another reminder that geopolitical tension often affects ordinary people first. Sometimes through cancelled flights, sometimes through delayed visas, sometimes through travel advisories. Well, the impact of international politics, that's not always seen on the battlefield. Often, it is felt by people standing in the queue, waiting for a document or hoping to begin a new chapter in their lives. Now, let's hop on to another segment. So far tonight, we have talked about America's heat wave, security concern inside the US Supreme Court, and embassy operation in West Asia. Now, let's come much closer to home. Can you imagine you are an Indian border security officer on a routine patrol? It seems like an ordinary day for you. Suddenly, you notice a man trying to cross into Nepal. You ask him to stop. Instead, he reportedly tries to run. Well, that's exactly what happened near the India-Nepal border in Uttar Pradesh. Security personnel, they detained a 36-year-old man who identified himself as Jordan Brown, claiming to be a US citizen from California. But there was one major problem. According to authorities, he was not carrying a passport or a visa or any valid travel document. During questioning, Brown, he reportedly told the investigators that he had earlier traveled to Thailand, where he lost his passport. He also claimed that he had once served in the US Navy. In fact, according to the police, he then traveled through Sri Lanka before entering India by sea in November 2025, and he had been living in Goa for several months. Can you think about that for a moment? A person claims to be an American citizen, claims to be a former US Navy officer, he claims to have traveled through several countries, and is finally stopped while trying to enter Nepal illegally without any identity documents. Now, naturally, that raises several questions. Who is he? Is his story accurate? Was he traveling without documents? And how did he remain in India for maybe months without a proper passport? Indian police says that they are now verifying all his claims. Officials have registered a case against the Immigration and Foreigners Act, and the investigation is continuing. During the search, authorities also recovered cash and 2 mobile phones from his possession. Now, this whole case, it reminds us of something very, very important here. Borders are not just lines on the maps. They are one of country's first line of security. Every day, border forces they stop thousands of people for routine checks. Most crossings are completely legal, but sometimes one unusual traveler, one missing document, or one suspicious moment, it can trigger a much larger investigation. Now, at this stage, investigators are still trying to establish the full facts here. Now, until then, many questions remain unanswered. But yes, while Indian investigators try to solve one mystery, American investigators have just solved another. And this time, it involves advanced technology, Iran, and a federal court in the United States. Now, when people hear the word smuggling, they usually imagine gold, cash, or maybe expensive jewelry. But in today's world, one of the most valuable things that can be moved illegally, it is technology. Specifically, technology that could have military applications. And very sadly narrating this story, ladies and gentlemen, a federal jury in the United States has found Iranian-born engineer Mahdi, basically a dual US-Iranian citizen, guilty of charges related to illegally extorting sensitive technology to Iran in violation of US sanctions. Prosecutors argued that the technology could have applications in navigation system used for military drones. According to prosecutors, he helped arrange shipment of electronic component from a US tech company through a Swiss-based business that they say ultimately supplied an Iranian company. US authorities allege that the Iranian company supplied customers that included Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. However, again, the defense presented a very different argument here. His lawyer maintained throughout the trial that he was innocent. They argued that the business transactions were legitimate and transparent and denied that he knowingly violated the US sanctions. Now, on some charges, the jury found him not guilty while convicting him on others. Sentencing that is scheduled for October. Now, real question, why is this such an important case? It is because modern wars are no longer fought only with soldiers. They are also fought with microchips, semiconductors, navigation system, artificial intelligence, and advanced electronics. Well, a teeny tiny electronic sensor, small enough to fit into the palm of your hand, it can become part of a much larger military system. And that's exactly why governments around the globe have tightened export control on sensitive technology. Countries today are competing not only for military strength but also for technical leadership. Well, who controls the advanced technology is the person or the nation often controls strategic advantage. And this particular case, it also highlights how global supply chain have become incredibly complex. A product may be designed in one country, manufactured in another, shipped through a third, and eventually end up somewhere completely different. And that makes the enforcement extremely challenging now. Now, for the investors, this whole case, it is about sanction and national security. For businesses, it is just a reminder that international trade, it now operates under increasing strict rules. And for the rest of the world, it shows that today's geopolitical competition, it is being fought not only on battlefield but also in laboratories, factories, and courtrooms. Now, so far tonight, we have talked about security, investigation, and technology. But our next story, that is deeply personal. It is about families, it is about emotions, it is about a difficult choice that thousands of immigrants, well, they have to make now. Imagine receiving a phone call from home. Your father has suffered a heart attack. Your mother has been diagnosed with cancer. A family member is in hospital. Your first instinct, it would be simple. Book the next flight, go home, be with your family, right? But for many H-1B visa holders in the United States, that particular decision, it's no longer so easy. Ladies and gentlemen, an immigration law firm, Bania's Law, has criticized the US State Department over what it describes as a case of long-term H-1B workers who are struggling to return to America after traveling abroad for family medical emergencies. The firm argues that visa processing delays and current prosecutors, they are creating uncertainty for people who have already built their lives in the US. Well, the concern became even more visible after reports highlighted the case of an Indian couple. According to the report, they were reluctant to travel to India to be with the wife's mother, who was battling advanced cancer. Their biggest fear was not the journey to India, it was whether they could be able to return to their jobs in the US without long delays. Can you think about that moment for a second? Imagine choosing your career or your family. Imagine wondering whether attending your mother's final days it could cost you your job. Well, that's the emotional reality many skilled immigrants say that they are facing. Well, under current procedure, many applicants traveling abroad they need visa stamping before re-entering the US. Administrative processing, appointment availability, and other requirements can sometimes create uncertainty over when they can return. Now, the whole issue, it has become part of a much larger immigration debate in the US. Over the past few years, visa rules, border security, immigration enforcement, and legal challenges have all become major political issues. Now, for many H-1B professionals, America is not just a workplace anymore. It is home. Their children study there, their careers are there, their dreams are there, and their parents, maybe their relative, their roots remain thousands of kilometers away. Sometimes life forces them to choose between the two. And that is why immigration is never just about paperwork. It's about people, it's about families, it's about difficult decisions, and about the human stories that are hidden behind every visa application. And yes, while many people worry about getting a US visa, another woman has gone viral for explaining exactly what happened during her successful visa interview. If you have ever applied for a US visa, you probably know the feeling. The waiting, the paperwork, the nervousness, and finally the interview. Well, for many applicants, those few minutes decide everything. Now, a content creator on TikTok recently went viral after sharing her US visa interview experience. She explained that the interview was much simpler than many people imagine and revealed the 3 questions she was asked before receiving visa approval. According to her, the interview began with a simple request for her passport, while the next question focused on the purpose of her visit to the United States. And finally, third question, she was asked where she planned to stay during her trip. But you know what caught people's attention? It was not just the question, it was her advice. She said applicants should answer honestly, remain calm, and avoid getting either extremely short answers or unnecessary long explanations. She also shared one interesting observation here. When the visa officer paused to type, she used that moment to briefly explain more about herself, her travel history, and why she would return home after her visit. She believes that helped strengthen her application. Now, of course, every visa application is different. Every applicant has a different background, and every decision it depends on individual circumstances. There is no guaranteed formula for approval, but her experience it has attracted millions of viewers because so many people dream about visiting the US, maybe for studying, working, or building future in the US. Visa interviews often become stressful because applicants, well, they feel every word matters, and in many cases it does. Consular officers, they look at travel history, financial documents, the purpose of the visit, and whether applicants meet the legal requirement under the US immigration law or not. Well, for many people, that short interview, it is much more than a conversation. It is beginning of a new opportunity or maybe the continuation of a dream. In the end, tonight's show, it was much more about a headline. At first glance, these stories may appear completely unrelated, but together they tell you one larger story. A story about security, a story about uncertainty, a story about people trying to adapt to a rapidly changing world. Because behind every headline, there is a human story. Behind every policy, there is a family. And behind every global event, there are ordinary people whose lives change forever. And that is why understanding the context behind the headline, that matters just as much as knowing the headlines themselves. And that is exactly what we aim to do every single day on Skyline. I'm Driti. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.